On a morning of low skies and absolute silence, a farm worker walks through the tall grass of an empty field. Beneath a rusty fence, he finds a pregnant German shepherd trapped by her flank in barbed wire. Without making a sound, the man takes pliers and cuts the metal. A car approaches, carrying a volunteer and a mother with a baby in her arms. While the rescuers tend to the dog, the baby slips away and walks quietly forward. Then, he presses his forehead against the dog's bloody snout, and for 1 second, everything stopped. Love animal stories? Then subscribe now and don't miss a thing. Thanks for following along. Now, back to our story. The field stretched endlessly under a gray Montana sky that morning, where only the rustling of tall grass and the tinkling of old fences betrayed the constant wind. Mike Dawson, a ranch hand at the Whispering Pines estate, was accustomed to the sound of his own footsteps on the hard-packed earth. He had been checking the perimeter fence line since dawn, a routine task that usually brought him comfort in its simplicity. This section of the property bordered public land, and it wasn't uncommon to find damage from wildlife or trespassers. The fence line stretched for miles across the rolling hills, separating the expansive Whispering Pines ranch from the neighboring wilderness. Mike had worked these lands for nearly 20 years, and every inch of the property felt like an extension of himself. He stopped abruptly when he heard a sharp whimper. The sound was so faint that for a moment he thought he might have imagined it. Mike stood perfectly still, allowing his ears to tune into the surrounding wilderness. There it was again, a painful, muted cry carried on the wind. Following the sound, Mike approached a section of barbed wire fence that separated the ranch property from the adjacent national forest. What he discovered made his weathered heart constrict. A German shepherd, her belly swollen with pregnancy, was trapped in the cruel metal barbs. Her flanks were pierced by the wire, and her once bright eyes were now clouded with pain. Her trembling paws barely touched the ground as she hung suspended from the fence. "Oh, Lord," Mike whispered, his voice catching in his throat. The image was as brutal as it was silent. There was no barking anymore, just the quiet strength of survival. With practiced hands but unusual trembling, Mike carefully began to free the dog. He removed his flannel shirt despite the morning chill and wrapped it around his hands to protect them from the sharp barbs. As he worked to disentangle the animal, he spoke softly, his deep voice a soothing balm in the vast emptiness. "Easy now, girl. I've got you. You're going to be all right." The dog's eyes met his, filled with something that transcended the pain, a desperate trust that Mike didn't take lightly. With gentle determination, he managed to free her from the fence's grip, cradling her large body as tenderly as he would a newborn calf. He pulled out his cell phone, grateful for the single bar of reception that sometimes graced this remote corner of the ranch. He called the local animal rescue group he'd donated to for years, but had never needed to contact. "I found a pregnant German shepherd caught in a fence on the northeast border of Whispering Pines," he explained, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "She's in bad shape, bleeding but alive." The woman on the other end assured him that help would arrive within the hour. Mike settled against an old oak tree, the injured dog's head resting on his lap. He noticed a worn collar around her neck, but no tags. Someone had owned this beautiful creature, perhaps still did, but the circumstances of her entrapment suggested a darker story. Less than 45 minutes later, Mike heard the sound of vehicles approaching along the dirt access road. A white van with Montana Wildlife Rescue emblazoned on its side bumped along the uneven terrain, followed by a modest blue sedan. Mike stood carefully, still supporting the injured dog. From the van emerged two women in matching navy blue windbreakers. Leslie, Knapp, a veteran rescuer with short grey hair and capable hands, and Amy Peterson, a younger volunteer with a medical kit slung over her shoulder. From the blue sedan stepped Sarah Coleman, a young mother with auburn hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. In her arms, she carried a small boy, no more than 18 months old, with curious eyes and a tiny blue jacket. "I'm so sorry," Sarah called out as she approached. "I volunteered to drive Amy here, but my babysitter cancelled last minute. This is my son, Ethan." Mike nodded understandingly as the rescuers rushed to assess the dog's condition. They spread a thermal blanket on the ground and carefully transferred the injured animal onto it. Leslie's experienced hands moved methodically over the dog's body, checking the wounds and vital signs. "She's lost some blood, but the wounds aren't as deep as they could be," Leslie announced, relief evident in her voice. "She's definitely pregnant, quite far along, I'd guess. We need to get her to Dr. Jenkins' clinic right away." While the rescuers prepared a makeshift stretcher, little Ethan squirmed in his mother's arms, his attention fixed on the injured dog. Sarah tried to distract him, whispering softly in his ear about the butterflies nearby, but the child remained transfixed by the scene unfolding before him. "Dog," Ethan said plainly, pointing his small finger toward the German shepherd. It was one of the few words in his limited vocabulary. "Yes, sweetie, but the dog is hurt. We need to stay back and let these nice ladies help her," Sarah explained, taking a step backward. But in that moment of distraction, Ethan wriggled free from his mother's grasp with surprising agility. Before anyone could react, the toddler had tottered over to the injured animal and plopped down beside her on the blanket. "Ethan!" Sarah gasped, lunging forward. Mike moved to intervene, but Leslie held up a hand, her eyes widening as she observed the unfolding interaction. With a gentleness that seemed impossible for his young age, Ethan placed his small hand on the dog's head. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he leaned forward and rested his forehead against the dog's bloodied muzzle. It was a brief gesture, but so profound that the entire scene seemed to freeze in time. The German shepherd, who had been whimpering softly, grew suddenly quiet. Her pain-filled eyes focused on the small human before her, and her tail thumped weakly against the blanket. Once, twice. "I've never seen anything like it," Amy whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Sarah finally gathered her wits and gently retrieved her son, checking him for any blood transfer. "I'm so sorry," she began, but Leslie interrupted her. "Don't be," the veteran rescuer said, her voice unusually soft. "In 20 years of animal rescue, I've never witnessed such a pure connection." Mike, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, cleared his throat. "Does she have a name?" he asked, nodding toward the dog. Leslie checked the collar, but found no identification tags. "No way to know for sure," she replied. "For now, she's Jane Doe." As they carefully loaded the injured dog into the rescue van, Ethan began to cry, reaching his arms toward the vehicle. His small face crumpled in distress as the doors closed, separating him from his new friend. "Dog," he repeated, this time with a note of sadness that broke his mother's heart. Sarah looked at Leslie, a question forming in her eyes. "Would it be possible? Would it help if we visited her at the clinic?" Leslie exchanged glances with Amy, then nodded slowly. "Actually, I think it might. There's something special happening here. I can't explain it, but I've learned to trust these connections when I see them." Mike, who had been preparing to return to his duties, stepped forward. "The clinic's in Riverdale, right? About 40 minutes from here?" Sarah nodded, bouncing Ethan gently in her arms to soothe his cries. "I'd like to check on her too, if..." "That's all right," Mike said, his weathered face softening. "Never been one to start something I can't finish." As the small caravan prepared to depart, Amy snapped a quick photo of Ethan reaching toward the rescue van. By nightfall, that image would travel through rescue networks across 3 states, touching hearts and opening wallets for the medical care that would be needed. None of them realized then that this chance encounter on a gray Montana morning would intertwine their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The wounded German Shepherd, temporarily named Jane Doe, had unknowingly begun a journey that would challenge the boundaries between human compassion and animal resilience. Dr. Elaine Jenkins had been the only veterinarian in Riverdale, Montana, for nearly 15 years, and she'd seen her fair share of difficult cases. But something about the pregnant German Shepherd brought in by the wildlife rescue team tugged at her heartstrings more than usual. Perhaps it was the quiet dignity in the dog's eyes despite her suffering, or the haunting story of how she'd been found impaled on a fence line miles from any residence. Her vitals are stable, but these lacerations need immediate attention, Dr. Jenkins announced after her initial examination. And those puppies are coming soon, I'd say within the week, if not sooner. The clinic buzzed with activity as the team worked efficiently to clean and treat the dog's wounds. X-rays confirmed that remarkably, there was no internal damage to her organs. However, the stress of the trauma had taken its toll on her body. Her heart rate remained elevated, and she flinched at every unexpected sound or movement. "We'll need to monitor her closely," Dr. Jenkins instructed her staff. "She's severely dehydrated, and we'll need to keep her calm to prevent premature labor." Leslie Knapp, who had stayed at the clinic after the rescue, nodded in agreement. "Does she have a microchip?" The vet technician shook her head. "No chip, just the worn leather collar." "We should give her a proper name," Leslie suggested. "Something better than Jane Doe." Dr. Jenkins studied the German Shepherd thoughtfully. Despite her ordeal, there was a serene strength about her. "How about Luna? She has that silvery sheen to her coat, reminds me of moonlight." The name seemed to fit perfectly, and Luna it became. That afternoon, as promised, Sarah Coleman arrived at the clinic with little Ethan in tow. The toddler had been inconsolable at home, repeatedly saying "dog" and pointing toward the door. Mike Dawson, the ranch hand who had found Luna, arrived shortly after, his weathered hat clutched respectfully in his hands. "How is she?" Sarah asked, bouncing Ethan on her hip as they entered the waiting room. Leslie's face brightened upon seeing them. "She's resting now. We've named her Luna." "Luna," Sarah repeated, testing the name. "That's beautiful." Dr. Jenkins emerged from the treatment area, wiping her hands on a paper towel. "Her wounds have been cleaned and stitched. She's on antibiotics and pain medication. The real concern now is keeping her calm until those puppies are ready." "Can we see her?" Mike asked, his deep voice uncharacteristically gentle. The veterinarian hesitated. "We usually limit visitors for critical cases, but..." Her eyes fell on Ethan, who was squirming in his mother's arms, clearly eager to be set down. "Given what Leslie told me about the connection between your son and Luna, I'm willing to make an exception. Just keep it brief, and everyone must stay calm." They followed Dr. Jenkins through a door marked "Staff Only" and into a quiet recovery ward. Luna lay on a padded bed in a large kennel, an IV line delivering fluids to her dehydrated body. Her amber eyes, though clouded with medication, immediately fixed on the visitors, particularly on Ethan. "Dog," the toddler exclaimed, pointing excitedly. "Yes, sweetie, that's Luna," Sarah whispered, setting him down but keeping a firm hold on his hand. Dr. Jenkins observed with professional interest as Ethan approached the kennel. "I'll open the door, but you must all stay very calm. She's in a fragile state." The moment the kennel door opened, Luna's tail began to thump weakly against the bedding. Despite her injuries and exhaustion, she seemed genuinely happy to see the child. Ethan, with his mother's guidance, gently placed his small hand on Luna's head, his touch impossibly tender for one so young. What happened next astonished everyone in the room. Luna's elevated heart rate, visible on the monitor beside her, began to slow almost immediately. The constant trembling that had worried the veterinary staff since her arrival gradually subsided. "This is remarkable," Dr. Jenkins murmured, watching the vital signs normalize on the monitor. Her heart rate has been erratic since she arrived, but look at it now. Mike stood back, a small smile playing on his lips as he watched the interaction. "Seems like the little fella has a way with her." Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Ethan has always been drawn to animals. We have a cat at home that follows him everywhere." After the brief visit, Dr. Jenkins pulled Sarah aside while Mike entertained Ethan in the waiting room. "Mrs. Coleman, I know this is an unusual request, but would you consider bringing Ethan back tomorrow?" Luna's response to him was quite extraordinary. "In course," Sarah replied without hesitation. "We'll come whenever you need us." That night, as Sarah tucked Ethan into bed, she marveled at how the day's events had unfolded. A simple offer to drive a volunteer had led them to an injured dog and an unexpected connection that seemed almost mystical in its intensity. She couldn't explain why her son and Luna had bonded so instantaneously, but she didn't need to understand it to recognize its significance. Morning brought troubling news. Luna had grown increasingly agitated overnight, crying out and refusing to eat. The veterinary staff had tried everything to calm her, but her heart rate remained dangerously elevated. "I hate to bother you so early," Dr. Jenkins said when she called Sarah at 7 a.m., "but we're concerned about Luna's stress levels. It could trigger premature labor, which would put both her and the puppies at risk." Within 30 minutes, Sarah arrived at the clinic with sleepy Ethan still in his pajamas, a stuffed toy dog clutched in his small hand. The transformation in Luna upon seeing the child was immediate and profound. Her whimpering ceased, and she visibly relaxed as Ethan approached her kennel. "It's the most remarkable thing I've ever seen," Dr. Jenkins confessed to Leslie, who had returned to check on Luna. "I've been a veterinarian for 20 years, and I've never witnessed such a powerful interspecies connection." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Sarah would bring Ethan to the clinic twice daily, once in the morning and once in the evening. During these visits, Luna would allow the veterinary staff to change her bandages and administer medications without resistance. The rest of the time, she remained anxious and on edge. "We need to find a more permanent solution," Dr. Jenkins admitted after the 4th day. "Luna's physical wounds are healing well, but her emotional state deteriorates dramatically when Ethan leaves." Sarah bit her lip considering the situation. As a single mother working from home as a graphic designer, her schedule was flexible, but spending hours each day at the veterinary clinic wasn't sustainable long-term. "What if," she began hesitantly, "what if I took her home? Just until she delivers the puppies? Our backyard is fenced, and I have that spare room off the kitchen that we never use." Leslie and Dr. Jenkins exchanged surprised glances. "That's a significant commitment," the veterinarian cautioned. "Luna will need constant monitoring, medication administration, and there's the very real possibility of complications during delivery." "I understand," Sarah replied, watching as Ethan sat cross-legged beside Luna's kennel, babbling happily to the attentive dog. "But look at them. She needs him, and honestly, I think he needs her too." Leslie's expression softened. "It's not a conventional approach, But nothing about this situation has been conventional from the start. After much discussion and planning, it was agreed Luna would continue her recovery at the Coleman residence under strict protocols established by Dr. Jenkins. The clinic would provide all necessary medical supplies, and Leslie volunteered to check in daily to assist with Luna's care. The day of the transfer, Mike Dawson unexpectedly appeared at the clinic, his truck loaded with supplies, a large, comfortable dog bed, premium dog food, and even a handcrafted wooden ramp to help Luna navigate any steps at Sarah's home. "Thought these might come in handy," he explained simply when Sarah expressed her surprise and gratitude. "Luna deserves the best after what she's been through." As they prepared Luna for the short journey to her temporary home, a new development arose. X-rays revealed that one of the puppies appeared significantly smaller than the others, positioned in a way that concerned Dr. Jenkins. "We'll need to watch this carefully," she explained, pointing to the shadowy image on the screen. "This little one might face some challenges." Sarah nodded solemnly, glancing at Ethan, who was helping Mike arrange the new dog bed in the back of her SUV. The little boy seemed to understand the importance of his role in Luna's life, treating her with a gentleness that belied his young age. What none of them realized was that Luna's journey to Sarah's home would set in motion a series of events that would test their newfound bond in ways they couldn't imagine. For lurking in the background was a shadow from Luna's past, one that would soon threaten the fragile peace they had established. As they settled Luna into the vehicle, Mike placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You're doing a good thing here," he said quietly. "Not many would open their home like this." Sarah smiled, watching as Ethan clambered into his car seat, chattering excitedly about bringing his dog home. "Sometimes the right path finds you," she replied, "even when you're not looking for it." None of them noticed the black pickup truck parked across the street, or the man inside watching their every move with cold, calculating eyes. The man who recognized the distinctive markings on Luna's coat. The man who had plans of his own. The spare room off Sarah's kitchen transformed overnight into a canine maternity suite. Mike had installed the wooden ramp leading to the back porch, making it easier for Luna to access the fenced yard. Dr. Jenkins had provided an extensive care kit, medications, special dietary supplements, and monitoring equipment to track Luna's vital signs as her delivery date approached. "Remember to check her temperature twice daily," Dr. Jenkins instructed as she helped settle Luna onto her new bed. "If it drops below 99 degrees, call me immediately. It's a sign that labor is imminent." Sarah nodded, mentally adding these new responsibilities to her already full plate. As a freelance graphic designer with deadlines looming for 3 different clients, she wondered briefly if she'd taken on too much. But then she glanced at Ethan, who sat beside Luna with his small hand resting gently on her side, and her doubts evaporated. Some connections transcended practical considerations. The first night was challenging. Luna whimpered periodically, her body still adjusting to the new environment. Each time, Ethan would stir in his bedroom upstairs, as if connected to Luna by an invisible thread. Shortly before dawn, Sarah found her son had somehow escaped his toddler bed and made his way downstairs. He was curled up against Luna's side, both of them sleeping peacefully. "You're supposed to stay in your big boy bed, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, though she couldn't bring herself to separate them. The next few days established a rhythm to their expanded household. Luna grew stronger, her wounds healing remarkably well under Sarah's attentive care. Dr. Jenkins visited every other day, while Leslie stopped by each morning to help with bandage changes and medication. Mike Dawson, to Sarah's surprise, appeared regularly with handyman fixes for the house. A leaky faucet repaired, a sticky door rehung, a loose porch step secured. "You don't have to do all this," Sarah told him on his third visit, offering him a glass of lemonade as he finished installing a pet gate between the kitchen and living room. Mike's weathered face creased in a shy smile. "Don't mind keeping busy. Besides, seems like you've got your hands full with the little guy and Luna." From across the room, Ethan let out a delighted giggle as Luna gently nuzzled his neck. The pregnant dog had grown increasingly protective of the toddler, positioning herself between him and the door whenever someone knocked. "They're inseparable," Sarah observed. "It's almost like they're having conversations we can't hear." Mike nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother used to say that children and animals speak the same language, one that adults forget as they grow up." On the fifth night of Luna's stay, Sarah awoke to an unusual sound. Groggy and disoriented, she fumbled for her phone to check the time. 2:17 a.m. The sound came again, a low, keening whine that sent her bolting upright. "Luna!" she whispered, hurrying downstairs. She found the German Shepherd pacing awkwardly. In her makeshift den, her breathing labored. With shaking hands, Sarah took Luna's temperature, 97.8 degrees. "It's time," she murmured, immediately dialing Dr. Jenkins' emergency number. The veterinarian answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the hour. "I'm on my way. Start timing the contractions and set up the whelping box we prepared." By the time Dr. Jenkins arrived 20 minutes later, Luna's labor had progressed rapidly. The first puppy, a robust male with a black mask like his mother's, arrived just as the veterinarian finished washing her hands. Luna instinctively cleaned her newborn, her movements gentle despite her obvious discomfort. "Good girl," Dr. Jenkins praised, examining the puppy briefly before returning him to Luna. "He looks perfect." Sarah stood watching from the doorway, afraid to intrude on the intimate process. She jumped slightly when she felt a tug on her pajama pants. Ethan had once again escaped his bed, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Baby dogs," he whispered, pointing at the newborn puppy. "Yes, sweetie, Luna is having her babies," Sarah explained, lifting him for a better view while maintaining a respectful distance. The second puppy arrived after a more prolonged and difficult push, a female with a distinctive white patch on her chest. Dr. Jenkins frowned slightly as she examined this one, noting its smaller size and weaker movements. "She needs a little help," the veterinarian murmured, deftly clearing the puppy's airways and stimulating it with a gentle rub. After a tense moment, the tiny creature let out a squeaky cry that made Luna's ears perk up attentively. But it was the third puppy that brought real concern to Dr. Jenkins's face. After nearly 40 minutes of increasingly exhausted labor, Luna delivered the smallest of the litter, a male puppy with a unique silver-gray coat that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. "He's struggling," Dr. Jenkins said quietly, working quickly to clear mucus from the tiny puppy's mouth and nose. Unlike his siblings, this one made no sound and barely moved. Sarah clutched Ethan closer, her heart constricting as she watched the veterinarian perform what looked like a miniature version of CPR on the newborn. "Is he?" "Not if I can help it," Dr. Jenkins replied determinedly, continuing her gentle ministrations. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan squirmed from his mother's arms and toddled forward before she could catch him. Before anyone could stop him, he had knelt beside the struggling puppy and placed his tiny palm on its back. "Wake up, baby dog," he said with surprising clarity. As if responding to a command, the puppy gave a sudden shudder and then released a weak but distinct cry. Dr. Jenkins blinked in astonishment as the tiny creature began to move with more vigor, its miniature paws flexing as life fully took hold. "Well, I'll be," she whispered. "Ethan's done it again." Luna, exhausted but alert, watched the entire interaction with keen interest. When Dr. Jenkins placed the revived puppy near her, she immediately began to clean it, her maternal instincts overriding her fatigue. By sea, Dawn, the Coleman kitchen, had transformed into a nursery for Luna and her 3 puppies. The birth had been successful, though Dr. Jenkins remained concerned about the smallest puppy, whom Ethan had already named Little One. "He's significantly underweight," the veterinarian explained as she packed her equipment, "and I'm worried about his respiratory function. The first 48 hours will be critical." Sarah nodded, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but her heart full. Somehow, in the span of a week, her quiet life with Ethan had expanded to include a mother dog, 3 newborn puppies, and a rotating cast of visitors invested in their welfare. News of Luna's delivery spread quickly through the small community. Of Riverdale, Leslie brought a handmade congratulations banner that she hung in the kitchen, while Mike arrived with a specially constructed puppy enclosure that would keep the newborn safe while allowing Luna easy access. "Thought this might be more practical than the cardboard box," he explained, setting up the wooden pen with its hinged gate. "Built it so Luna can step over to get to her babies, but the little ones can't climb out once they start moving around." Sarah thanked him with a spontaneous hug that left the reserved ranch hand blushing and awkwardly adjusting his hat. "You've been so kind through all of this, Mike. I don't know how to repay you." "Seeing Luna and her pup safe is payment enough," he replied, though his eyes lingered on Sarah's face a moment longer than necessary. As the first week of the puppies' lives progressed, a worrying pattern emerged. While the 2 larger puppies, now named Shadow and Star by Ethan, nursed vigorously and gained weight steadily, Little One struggled. He often couldn't compete with his siblings for access to milk and tired quickly during feeding attempts. Dr. Jenkins recommended supplemental bottle feeding, showing Sarah how to prepare the special formula and coax the tiny puppy to accept the rubber nipple. It was exhausting work, requiring feeding sessions every 2 hours around the clock. "But I don't know how you're managing all this," Leslie remarked during one of her daily visits, watching as Sarah simultaneously bottle-fed Little One while answering emails on her laptop. Ethan sat nearby, reading a picture book to Luna and the other puppies in his own invented language. Sarah smiled tiredly. "Honestly, neither do I. But when you're in the middle of something important, you just find the strength somehow." On the 10th day, disaster struck. Little One, who had seemed to be slowly improving, suddenly took a turn for the worse. His breathing became labored and he refused the bottle entirely. "Get him to the clinic immediately," Dr. Jenkins instructed over the phone. "I'll meet you there." Sarah bundled the failing puppy into a warm towel, her heart racing with fear. As she prepared to leave, Ethan began to cry, somehow understanding the gravity of the situation despite his young age. "Baby dog sick," he sobbed, reaching for Little One. "Yes, sweetie, but Dr. Jenkins is going to help him," Sarah assured him, though her own voice trembled. "Grandma is coming to stay with you while I take Little One to the doctor." But Ethan would not be consoled. His cries escalated to screams as Sarah's mother arrived to babysit. Even Luna grew agitated, pacing anxiously between her remaining puppies and the distraught toddler. "Maybe you should take him with you," Sarah's mother suggested after multiple failed attempts to distract Ethan. "I've never seen him like this before." Despite her misgivings about bringing a toddler to what might be a medical emergency, Sarah relented. Within minutes, they were in the car, Ethan hiccuping quietly in his car seat while Sarah drove with one hand and held the towel-wrapped puppy against her chest with the other. At the clinic, Dr. Jenkins immediately took Little One to the treatment area, her expression grave. Sarah sat in the waiting room with Ethan on her lap, both of them unnaturally quiet as they waited for news. An hour later, the veterinarian emerged, her face showing signs of both exhaustion and confusion. "He's stabilized for now, but I'm not sure how long it will last. His lungs aren't fully developed, and he's having trouble regulating his body temperature." "What can we do?" Sarah asked, instinctively holding Ethan closer. Dr. Jenkins hesitated. "Medically, we're doing everything possible, but..." She knelt down to Ethan's level. "Would you like to see little one? He might be happy to see his friend." In the treatment room, the tiny puppy lay in an incubator-like setup. Special heat, lamps, maintaining his body temperature while a monitoring system tracked his vital signs. Ethan approached carefully, his usual boisterousness replaced by a solemn focus that seemed beyond his years. "Can I touch him?" he asked in a small voice. "Very gently," Dr. Jenkins permitted, lowering the side of the enclosure. What happened next would later be described by the veteran veterinarian as the most inexplicable thing I've witnessed in my medical career. Ethan placed his small hand on little one's back, exactly as he had done during the birth. He leaned close and whispered something inaudible to the adults in the room. Little one's readings on the monitor began to change. His heart rate strengthened, his oxygen levels improved. Within minutes, the puppy lifted his head weakly and emitted a tiny squeak that sounded remarkably like a greeting. "This defies medical explanation," Dr. Jenkins murmured, watching the numbers continue to improve. "But I've learned not to question miracles when I see them." By that evening, little one was deemed stable enough to return home, though with strict monitoring protocols in place. As Sarah carried both the puppy and her sleepy son back into the house, she felt a strange sense of having crossed an invisible threshold. Something profound was happening between Ethan and these animals, something that transcended ordinary, human-animal bonds. What she didn't yet realize was that this extraordinary connection would soon face its greatest challenge as the shadow from Luna's past prepared to emerge into the light. 3 weeks after Luna gave birth, life in the Coleman household had settled into a new normal. The puppy's eyes had opened, revealing Shadow's deep amber gaze, Star's chocolate brown eyes, and little one's unusual blue-gray stare that Dr. Jenkins said might change color as he matured. Though still the smallest, little one had defied the veterinarian's cautious prognosis, gaining strength daily under Ethan's constant attention. Sarah had converted her home office into a permanent nursery for Luna and her puppies, with a desk tucked in the corner where she could work on her graphic design projects while supervising the growing family. The arrangement wasn't ideal for productivity, but watching Ethan's delight as the puppies began to wobble around on unsteady legs made the professional sacrifice worthwhile. "You've created quite the menagerie here," Mike commented one Saturday morning as he installed a more secure gate at the bottom of the stairs. He had become a regular presence in their lives, his visits extending beyond handyman tasks to include bringing groceries, taking out the trash, and occasionally watching Ethan when Sarah needed to attend client meetings. "It wasn't exactly planned," Sarah replied with a laugh, stepping over Luna, who had positioned herself, as usual, in the doorway where she could monitor both her puppies and Ethan simultaneously. Mike's weathered face softened as he watched the toddler guide little ones. Exploration of a toy bowl. Some of the best things in life aren't planned. Sarah caught his gaze and felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. Since her divorce 3 years ago, she'd avoided anything resembling romantic interest, focusing entirely on raising Ethan and building her freelance business. But there was something about Mike Dawson's quiet dependability that had begun to penetrate the protective walls around her heart. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Luna immediately tensed, a low growl rumbling in her throat as she positioned herself between the door and Ethan. "Expecting someone?" Mike asked, instinctively moving closer to Sarah. She shook her head, puzzled by Luna's uncharacteristic reaction. The German Shepherd had been unfailingly gentle since arriving in their home, never showing aggression toward any of their visitors. "It's probably Leslie," Sarah reasoned, though the animal rescue volunteer usually called before dropping by. "Luna, it's okay, girl." But Luna's growl only intensified as Sarah approached the door. Through the peephole, she saw a man in his late 40s wearing a tan Stetson hat and a leather jacket despite the warm spring weather. His weathered face was unfamiliar, his expression impatient as he shifted from foot to foot on her porch. Sarah opened the door cautiously, keeping the security chain engaged. "Can I help you?" The man's thin lips stretched into what might generously be called a smile. "Name's Jackson Reynolds. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I'm sorry. I don't understand," Sarah replied, though a sense of unease began to crawl up her spine. "My dog," the man stated flatly, "German Shepherd female, been missing for about a month now. Heard through the grapevine she ended up here." Behind Sarah, Luna's growl escalated to a series of sharp warning barks. Ethan began to cry, frightened by the unfamiliar sound from his normally gentle companion. Mike appeared at Sarah's side, his substantial frame filling the narrow opening. "Everything all right?" Reynolds' eyes narrowed slightly at Mike's appearance, but his artificial smile remained fixed, just having a friendly conversation about my property. "The dog was found injured on Whispering Pines Ranch," Mike stated, his voice deceptively calm. "No tags, no microchip." "Don't need to chip my own dogs," Reynolds countered. "Got paperwork in my truck, AKC registration, vet records, the works." He gestured toward a black pickup parked at the curb, the same vehicle that had been observed near the veterinary clinic weeks earlier, though neither Sarah nor Mike recognized it. Sarah felt her heart beginning to race. Luna had become an integral part of their family, her puppies a source of daily joy and wonder. The thought of this cold-eyed stranger claiming ownership sent a wave of protective panic through her. "She was badly injured when we found her," Sarah said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Caught in a barbed wire fence, pregnant and alone." Reynolds shrugged dismissively. "Got spooked during a thunderstorm, ran off. These things happen. Now, if you'll just hand over what's mine, I'll be on my way." His eyes hardened. All four of them. The implication was clear. He wanted not just Luna, but her puppies as well. The puppies that Ethan had helped name, that he read stories to each night, that responded to his gentle touch with absolute trust. "I think you should leave," Mike said, his hand moving to rest protectively on Sarah's shoulder. "If you have a legitimate claim, you can go through proper channels." Reynolds' facade of friendliness evaporated. "Listen carefully. That dog is valuable breeding stock. Those puppies are worth good money. I'm being nice by asking first, but make no mistake, I will get them back." With that ominous declaration, he turned and stalked back to his truck, pausing only to call over his shoulder, "I'll be back with the sheriff tomorrow. Have them ready." As the black pickup roared away, Sarah closed the door with trembling hands. Luna immediately rushed to Ethan, licking his tears away as the toddler wrapped his arms around her neck. "He can't take them, can he?" Sarah asked, looking desperately at Mike. "You saw how Luna reacted to him. She was terrified." Mike's expression was grim. "If he has documentation proving ownership, it gets complicated. But something doesn't add up. Why wait a month to come? Looking, and how did he know they were here?" Sarah sank into a chair, watching as Ethan led a still agitated Luna back to her puppies. The bond between her son and these animals had become profound. Luna treated Ethan as if he were one of her own pups, while the puppies, especially Little One, followed him with unwavering devotion. "We need to talk to Leslie," Sarah decided. And Dr. Jenkins, they might know something about this Reynolds character. Within an hour, an emergency meeting had convened in Sarah's living room. Leslie arrived first, her normally cheerful face tight with concern. Dr. Jenkins followed shortly after, accompanied by a young woman Sarah didn't recognize, Megan Thompson, an attorney who specialized in animal welfare cases and volunteered with the rescue organization. Jackson Reynolds. Leslie practically spat the name. I should have known. He runs what he calls a breeding operation about 40 miles north of here. More like a puppy mill, though he's careful to stay just within legal requirements. Dr. Jenkins nodded grimly. I've treated dogs from his facility before. Always malnourished, often with untreated medical conditions. He breeds German Shepherds primarily for security firms, trained to be aggressive. Sarah glanced toward the nursery room, where Luna lay contentedly as Ethan gently stroked Star's ears under Mike's watchful eye. That doesn't sound like Luna at all. She's the gentlest dog I've ever known. Which might be why Reynolds was so quick to discard her, Megan suggested, opening her laptop. If she didn't show the aggressive tendencies he breeds for, she'd be worthless to his operation. Leslie's eyes flashed with anger. Worthless enough to abandon, injured and pregnant in the middle of nowhere? Or worse, Mike said quietly. In from the doorway. The way she was caught in that fence, it didn't look like an accident to me. A horrified silence fell over the group as the implications sank in. Luna hadn't accidentally wandered onto Whispering Pines Ranch and become entangled in barbed wire. Someone, possibly Reynolds himself, had deliberately left her there, expecting nature to take its course. But why come looking for her now? Sarah wondered aloud, the question that had been nagging at her since Reynolds' visit. Megan tapped at her computer thoughtfully. Has Luna or the puppies been in the news? Social media, perhaps? Leslie winced slightly. Actually, yes. That photo I took of Ethan reaching toward the rescue van went viral in animal rescue circles. And I may have posted updates about Luna and the puppies on our organization's Facebook page, which Reynolds might have seen, Dr. Jenkins concluded. And if the puppies are showing exceptional temperament or appearance, they'd be valuable breeding stock, Sarah finished, feeling sick at the thought. Megan's fingers flew over her keyboard. I'm checking his legal status now. If we can prove neglect or cruelty, we might have grounds to challenge his ownership claim. But we'd need evidence, Leslie pointed out. And if Reynolds is as careful as you say... Wait, Mike interrupted, his eyes suddenly alight with realization. The fence line where I found Luna borders public land. There might be trail cameras. Sarah looked at him questioningly. The Forest Service installs them to monitor wildlife movements, Mike explained. I know where most of them are positioned. If Luna was deliberately abandoned, one of those cameras might have captured it. Hope flickered through the room for the first time since Reynolds' unwelcome appearance. I'll make some calls, Mike said, already pulling out his cell phone. I have a buddy who works for the Forest Service. While Mike stepped outside to make his calls, Megan outlined their legal options. Even without evidence of cruelty, we can file for an emergency temporary guardianship order. It won't prevent him from claiming ownership eventually if his paperwork is legitimate, but it will buy us time. Time for what? Sarah asked, feeling overwhelmed by the legal terminology. Dr. Jenkins leaned forward, her normally professional demeanor giving way to fierce determination. Time to build a case. If Reynolds abandoned Luna, especially in her condition, it constitutes animal cruelty under Montana law. That would invalidate any ownership claim. And if the trail cameras don't show anything, Sarah pressed, needing to understand the worst-case scenario. Megan hesitated. Then we focus on Luna's current welfare and the special relationship she's formed with Ethan. It's not a guaranteed win, but judges do consider the best interests of the animal in disputed cases. From the nursery came the sound of Ethan's delighted giggle as little one attempted to climb into his lap. The tiny puppy, once so fragile that his survival had seemed miraculous, now displayed boundless energy when in the toddler's presence, though he still tired quickly during play. "We have to fight this," Sarah said with newfound resolve. "Whatever it takes," Mike returned, his expression cautiously optimistic. "My contact says there are 2 cameras in that section. He's going to check the footage from the night before I found Luna and email it to us." The impromptu war council continued well into the evening, with Megan drafting legal documents at Sarah's kitchen table, while Leslie made calls to rally support from the rescue community. Dr. Jenkins reviewed Luna's medical records, documenting every injury and sign of neglect that could strengthen their case. As night fell, the visitors departed with promises to reconvene the following morning before Reynolds threatened return with the sheriff. Mike was the last to leave, lingering at the door with concern etched on his face. "Will you be all right tonight?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, though anxiety still churned in her stomach. "We'll be fine. I've got the security system armed, and Luna doesn't let Ethan out of her sight anyway." Mike hesitated, then reached out to gently squeeze her hand. "Call me if anything happens, anything at all. I'm only 15 minutes away." After he left, Sarah double-checked all the locks and windows before heading upstairs to put Ethan to bed. To her surprise, she found her son had already fallen asleep on his floor, surrounded by 3 drowsy puppies with Luna standing guard nearby. "He wouldn't leave them," Sarah's mother explained from the rocking chair in the corner. She had arrived earlier to help with Ethan while the adults strategized, said the puppies were scared and needed him. Sarah's heart constricted with love and worry. How could she explain to her sensitive, animal-loving son that a stranger might take away the creatures he had helped save, had bonded with so deeply? The puppies were only 3 weeks old, far too young to be separated from their mother under normal circumstances, let alone to be placed in an environment like the one Reynolds apparently operated. As if sensing her distress, Luna padded over and pressed her warm body against Sarah's legs, looking up with eyes that seemed to hold a depth of understanding beyond her canine nature. "We won't let him take you," Sarah whispered, kneeling to wrap her arms around Luna's neck. "I promise." That night, Sarah barely slept, her mind racing with contingency plans. By dawn, she had made a decision. If the legal efforts failed, she would take Luna, the puppies, and Ethan and leave. It was a drastic step, perhaps even a foolish one, but she couldn't bear the thought of Reynolds taking these animals back to a life of neglect and exploitation. As the first light of morning filtered through her bedroom window, Sarah's phone pinged with an email notification. Mike's Forest Service contact had come through with the trail camera footage. With trembling fingers, Sarah opened the attachment, not knowing if what she was about to see would save Luna and her puppies, or confirm that legally they belonged to the cold-eyed man who would return in just a few hours to claim them. Sarah stared at her phone screen, her breath caught in her throat as the grainy nighttime footage from the trail camera began to play. The timestamp showed 11:42 p.m., exactly 4 weeks earlier, the stormy night before Mike had found Luna. The video quality was poor, further hampered by heavy rainfall, but there was no mistaking what it showed. A black pickup truck stopping. Along the forest access road, 2 figures emerged, one instantly recognizable as Jackson Reynolds, the other a burlier man Sarah didn't know. Between them, they dragged a struggling dog from the truck bed. Luna. Even in the dim footage, her pregnant belly was visible as she tried to resist. Reynolds struck her hard across the muzzle, then said something to his companion. The second man produced what looked like a length of rope, which they used to drag Luna toward the fence line. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry of outrage as she watched them deliberately force Luna into the barbed wire, ensuring she became entangled. Reynolds gave the trap dog one final kick before both men returned to the truck and drove away, leaving Luna to struggle helplessly in the storm. "They tried to kill her," Sarah whispered to the empty room. "They left her to die." With shaking hands, she forwarded the damning footage to Megan, Dr. Jenkins, Leslie, and Mike, adding a simple message: "We have proof." By 8 o'clock that morning, Sarah's living room had once again transformed into Command Central. Megan arrived first, her expression triumphant after viewing the footage. "This changes everything," the attorney declared, already on the phone with the county sheriff's office. "This isn't just abandonment, it's deliberate animal cruelty. We need to file charges immediately." Leslie and Dr. Jenkins arrived together, both incensed by what they'd seen. Mike was the last to join them, having stopped to speak with his Forest Service contact to ensure the chain of custody for the video evidence remained unbroken. "Reynolds is scheduled to arrive with the sheriff at 10, Megan informed the group, once they were all assembled. "But I've already spoken with Deputy Matthews. He's seen the footage and is preparing an arrest warrant instead of an ownership verification." "So Luna and the puppies are safe?" Sarah asked, hardly daring to believe it could be resolved so quickly. Megan's smile was cautiously optimistic. "Reynolds has no legal claim now. Once he's charged with animal cruelty, any ownership documents become irrelevant." The mood in the room lightened considerably. Leslie began making calls to share the good news with the rescue network, while Dr. Jenkins performed a checkup on Luna and her puppies, all of whom continued to thrive despite the tension permeating the household. "Little ones gained another 2 ounces, the veterinarian announced proudly, weighing the smallest puppy on her portable scale. "He's still behind his siblings developmentally, but he's making remarkable progress." Ethan, who had been unusually quiet all morning, as if sensing the adult's anxiety, brightened at this news. "Little one strong," he declared, patting the puppy gently. Dr. Jenkins smiled at the toddler who had become her unofficial assistant during these examinations. "Yes, he is. And do you know why?" When Ethan shook his head, she continued softly, "Because he has you to look after him." At precisely 10 o'clock, 2 vehicles pulled into Sarah's driveway, Jackson Reynolds' black pickup truck, followed by a brown and tan Sheriff's Department SUV. From her living room window, Sarah watched as Reynolds approached the house with confident strides, clearly expecting to leave with Luna and her puppies in tow. Behind him, Deputy Matthews, a stern-faced woman in her 40s, followed at a measured pace. Sarah opened the door before Reynolds could knock, Megan standing supportively at her side. Mike positioned himself just behind them, his tall frame a reassuring presence. "Ready to hand over my property?" Reynolds asked without preamble, his thin smile failing to reach his cold eyes. "Mr. Reynolds," Megan stepped forward, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "I'm Megan Thompson, attorney for Ms. Coleman and Montana Wildlife Rescue. I believe you should speak with Deputy Matthews before we proceed." Reynolds turned, irritation flashing across his face as the deputy approached. "Let's get this over with. I've got the paperwork right here." "Jackson Reynolds," Deputy Matthews interrupted, her voice crisp and official. "I'm here to inform you that you're under investigation for animal cruelty under Montana Code, Section 45-8-2111. Reynolds' confident expression faltered. "What the hell are you talking about? We have video evidence of you deliberately abandoning and injuring a pregnant German shepherd 4 weeks ago," the deputy continued, nodding toward Sarah's phone where the incriminating footage was queued. "Up and ready to play. I'll need you to come to the station to answer some questions." "This is ridiculous," Reynolds sputtered, his face flushing with anger. That dog is valuable breeding stock. Why would I? Because she wasn't aggressive. Enough for your clients, Mike interjected, his normally quiet voice hardened with disgust. A gentle dog isn't much use to people looking for security animals, is she? For a moment, Reynolds seemed ready to argue further, but as Deputy Matthews placed a hand on her holstered taser, he thought better of it. With a final venomous glare at Sarah, he allowed himself to be escorted back to the sheriff's vehicle. "This isn't over," he called over his shoulder as the deputy opened the car door for him. "That footage could be anyone. You can't prove it was me." But the bravado in his voice had been replaced by uncertainty. The evidence was clear enough that even he must have recognized the trouble he faced. As the vehicles pulled away, Sarah felt her knees weaken with relief. Mike caught her elbow, steadying her with gentle strength. "It's really over?" she asked, looking between Mike and Megan. The attorney nodded, closing her briefcase with a satisfying snap. "Reynolds will face charges. Based on that footage and Luna's documented injuries, he's looking at substantial fines and possible jail time. As for Luna and her puppies, they're legally considered rescued animals now. The rescue organization will have temporary custody until permanent arrangements can be made." "Permanent arrangements," Sarah repeated, the words suddenly opening a new question in her mind. She had been so focused on protecting Luna and her puppies from Reynolds that she hadn't considered what would happen after the immediate threat was resolved. Leslie, seeming to read her thoughts, approached with a compassionate smile. "You know, foster families often have first option to adopt if they're interested." "Adopt?" Sarah echoed, the possibility both thrilling and overwhelming. 1 dog and 3 puppies would quadruple her pet responsibilities overnight, not to mention the financial considerations of food, veterinary care, and training. "Think about it," Leslie suggested gently. "There's no rush to decide." But as Sarah glanced toward the nursery where Ethan sat reading a picture book to an attentive Luna and her puppies, she knew there was really no decision to make. These animals had become family in the truest sense of the word. "I don't need to think about it," she said, conviction replacing uncertainty in her voice. "They belong here, with us." The weeks that followed brought a flurry of activity to the Coleman household. Jackson Reynolds was formally charged with animal cruelty based on the trail camera footage and corroborating evidence from a former employee who came forward after news of the arrest spread. Reynolds' remaining dogs were seized and placed with various rescue organizations, bringing an end to his breeding operation. Luna and her puppies continued to thrive under Sarah's care. Shadow, the largest and most confident of the litter, appointed himself Ethan's personal bodyguard, following the toddler everywhere and alerting Sarah with distinctive barks when Ethan attempted any particularly risky climbing adventures. Star, the female with the white chest patch, revealed a mischievous streak, constantly stealing socks and hiding them under furniture. And Little One, though still smaller than his siblings, compensated with boundless enthusiasm and intelligence that Dr. Jenkins described as almost uncanny. The remarkable bond between Ethan and the dogs, particularly Little One, attracted attention beyond their small community. A child psychologist from the State University requested permission to observe their interactions for a research paper on animal-assisted therapy for young children. A documentary filmmaker contacted Sarah about including their story in a series about extraordinary animal-human connections. "It's getting to be a bit much," Sarah confessed to Mike one evening as they sat on her back porch watching Ethan and the puppies play in the fading summer light. The ranch hand had become a fixture in their lives, his initial handyman visits evolving into regular dinner appearances and weekend outings that increasingly resembled family activities. Mike nodded understandingly. "You could always say no to the attention. Their story is special, but it doesn't have to be public if you don't want it to be. Sarah considered this, absently twirling a strand of hair around her finger. The psychologist's research might help other children, though, and Dr. Jenkins says the information they're gathering about little ones' development could be valuable for veterinary medicine. Always thinking of others, Mike observed with a soft smile that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. It's one of the things I admire most about you. The moments stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Before either could break the comfortable silence, Ethan came running over with little one at his heels, both of them muddy from their adventures. "Mama! Mike! Little one talked!" the toddler announced excitedly. Sarah exchanged an amused glance with Mike. "Talked, huh? What did he say?" "He said he loves us," Ethan replied with absolute certainty, "and that we're his forever family." Rather than correcting her son's imagination, Sarah pulled him into a hug, mud and all. "I think you're right, sweetheart. We are his forever family." Later that night, after Ethan was tucked into bed with Shadow keeping watch from a dog bed in the corner, the only one of the puppies who had graduated to sleeping in Ethan's room, Sarah found herself once again on the porch with Mike. Luna lay at their feet, her motherly duties temporarily suspended as Star and Little One slept curled together in the nursery. "I've been thinking," Mike began, his voice carrying an unusual note of nervousness. "The ranch is awfully quiet these days." Sarah turned to look at him, sensing the conversation was heading somewhere significant. "Is that a bad thing?" "It never used to be," he replied thoughtfully. "I always figured I was meant for a solitary life. Then I found Luna, and that led me to you and Ethan, and now—" He paused, gathering his courage. "Now I can't imagine going back to that silence." Sarah's breath caught as she realized what he was trying to say. "Mike, I'm not asking for anything right now," he hurried to clarify. "Just the chance to see where this might go. You, me, Ethan, and this little pack we've somehow created." Sarah thought about the whirlwind of changes the past 2 months had brought, from a quiet life with just her and Ethan to a household buzzing with activity, filled with barks and yips and laughter. Somehow, in the midst of rescuing Luna, she had found pieces of herself that had been missing since her divorce, perhaps even before. "I'd like that," she said simply, reaching for his hand. From inside the house came a soft whine. Little One, no doubt sensing he was missing something important. Sarah laughed, the sound light and free in the evening air. "I should check on him," she said, though she made no immediate move to rise. "We should check on him," Mike corrected gently, standing and offering her his hand. Together they walked back into the house, where Luna met them at the door with knowing eyes. The German shepherd, who had once been left to perish, now stood strong and healthy, the unlikely matriarch of a family that had formed around an act of cruelty, transformed by compassion. 6 months later, the story came full circle when Dr. Jenkins called with news about one of Reynolds' former breeding dogs that had been placed in a rehabilitation program. "She's ready for adoption," the veterinarian explained. "But she's timid, especially around men. She needs a special home, somewhere she can learn to trust again." Sarah looked around her living room, where Mike now sat cross-legged on the floor with Ethan, both of them teaching Little One a new trick, while Luna, Shadow, and Star watched with varying degrees of interest. The house that had once seemed too large for just her and Ethan now vibrated with life and love. "Bring her over tomorrow," Sarah decided without hesitation. "We'll see if she'd like to join our family." As she hung up the phone, Sarah caught Mike's questioning glance. She smiled, remembering Luna's first day in their home, the uncertainty and fear that had eventually blossomed into belonging. "Another rescue?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Another chance, Sarah corrected, crossing the room to join her unlikely family, a family that had begun with a wounded dog and a toddler's touch, and continued to grow in ways she could never have imagined. Ethan looked up from his training session with little one, his eyes bright with the wisdom children sometimes possess without knowing it. "More love," he declared simply, as if that explained everything. And perhaps, Sarah thought as she settled beside Mike with Luna's head resting warmly against her knee, it did. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Sarah, Ethan and Luna has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If you enjoyed this tale of unexpected connections and second chances, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore life's complexity and the bonds that sustain us through challenges. Join our community of storytellers and listeners. We're waiting to hear from you in the comments section below.